Okay, Dave Alexander in our green room with Will Hanna, so we're going to go over to them now for some very interesting talk.
Interesting. Oh, no pressure then. Yeah. Well, like in National Dragster, they have that on the run feature, and it just seemed like a good idea, seeing as we had Will, who couldn't run fast enough to get away, to ask him some questions. It's Will Hanna, all the way from Houston in Texas, over here with Fred Hanson this weekend. And we thought we'd do a mini This Is Your Life and ask you a few questions about what your history is and what you've been up to and
Are we allowed
racing.
to go over that on the radio?
Well, yeah, there are some things we shouldn't say in public.
Discretion advised.
Absolutely, yeah. Look away now. So, you're from Houston in Texas. And,
yeah, born and raised in the area down there, and work all home.
And when did you first get into drag racing?
Pretty much grew up around it. I mean, I remember being a small kid growing up at the racetrack, and as kids, all the kids in the pits, we'd have our own little foot races, and then it got more progressed to where we'd actually have a rag in our pocket, and at the finish line we'd throw it out, and that was our parachute. So. And then our parents would get involved, and they'd actually handicap us based off of age.
Sounds like a good idea. When did you first actually get involved with the team?
I grew up, my dad and Jay Meyer were close friends, and so I grew up racing in the States with his alcohol dragster team in the 80s. And then I actually started driving when they first did the Junior Drag Racing League back in 1994. So I'm old enough, if you see my Junior Drag Racing videos, they're usually on one of the classic or vintage channels.
And you worked your way up through from methanol funny cars?
Yeah, I started off with Jay. Whenever I got out of the Army, I started going with Jay Meyer's team and started just washing parts and polishing wheels and doing what I could and keeping my eyes open and trying to learn as much as possible.
Yeah, and from that, you eventually graduated to doing the driving chores as well sometimes?
Yeah, actually, I made a couple of laps in a funny car before I had my Super Comp license. Just did a few license passes, and then I got an opportunity to do some driving in an A-Fuel car. Crewed on that and crew chiefed on that car for a little while. Then back in 2004, 2005, I got the nod to drive for Harry Clack's alcohol funny car.
Yeah, and what else have you driven? What other kinds of car?
I've made a few laps in a Pro Mod, but not a whole lot. But I guess I could say I did it.
And you've been a crew chief since about 7 years now?
Yeah, 2003. I was doing a bottom end for Jason Cannon's alcohol dragster. Actually, the car, forget the guy's name, in Malta. Just bought it and reset the record down there. Went to work for them as a bottom end guy, and I kind of had some ideas of what to do on the tune-up. And finally, the last race of the year, they said, "Okay, well, you've been talking about all this stuff you want to do. Here's your chance. You get to do it this race. Make or break it." And first lap went out there in the heat of the day. We went out there and ran a 5:48, and number 2 qualifier was a 5:57. So I kind of got the job to be crew chief after that, and we won the Division II championship the next year.
Fantastic. And you picked up and were doing some work with Howard Main?
Yeah, after I drove for 2 years the ATC funny car. We had a Lenco drive combination in that car, so it's kind of experimental. After that, I went to work for Steve Harker, working on his team, and then I also was working as a consultant for Howard Main, who Fred Hanson bought the car from.
Yep. And that's when you first met Fred, and how did he persuade you to come over here and work for him?
Well, Howard had asked me to come over when Fred was, looking at the car and going over it, and I was, more involved with the tune-up side of it, so I went over it, and I really didn't know what they were looking for, and I showed them all the run sheets and what everything was, and they just kind of looked at it like, okay. And so a little bit later in the day, he asked me, well, what would it take for you to come over? And so we talked about it and came up with a deal. And I was already working for Chris Foster last year, so I had missed the race at Mantorp. But this year I'll be at all the races with Fred. Actually, be at all the races and going in between all the races and getting the car prepped and serviced for the next race.
Yeah, and you came over in the winter period as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I made 2 trips. I came over in October and tore the car down and sent, boxed everything up and sent what needed to be sent back to the States and whatnot, and reworked and refurbished, and then came back over first part of May and put everything back together and got everything ready for the race here. actually was sure, like a lot of people out here racing, had to deal with a lot of drama from the volcano because my parts was shipping back to Fred, sat around on a shipping dock for 2.5 weeks while just waiting for it to get here.
You must have a fair few frequent flyer miles now as well.
Yeah, I think they're getting up there. Pretty soon the airlines will be calling me Mr. Hanna.
Smile when you say that, yeah. And so this is your second year now looking at European racing.
Yeah, quite impressed with it.
Yeah. So, how do we compare with the racing back in the States, say a divisional or a national event?
Well, it's like I've said on my website. After last year, came away with a lot more respect. I mean, not saying I didn't have any respect, but the ingenuity of the racers over here is really overwhelming. And I've raced in the States for a few years now, and running over here and trying to win week in and week out and trying to win a European championship is every bit as tough as trying to win a divisional championship back in the States.
Yeah. So many people say that it's tougher for us because it's harder for us to get hold of the parts.
I could see where especially years ago would probably be harder, but you're starting to see a lot of stuff come over here as soon as it comes out. I think there's quite a few U.S. tuners over here this weekend. I'm starting to see more and more of that over here.
There is, and how's the word spreading back in the US about the racing? Now that we have got more and more drivers and tuners coming over here, what's the word like in the States about what we're doing over here?
You're really starting to see more awareness. I think the classes, the top methanol classes and the Pro Mod class especially, with as much participation, the level of competition's up, and people are actually following it and what's going on. And whenever I go to a race at the States, typically people ask me what's going on in Europe, how's this, and I saw so and so did this, and so it's interesting to see how many people follow it.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of reaction was there when Mickey won the Wally?
Oh, it was pretty neat, and in the States, and everybody in the States knew that was a big deal for Europe, especially in Gainesville when he runnered up, and then for him to kind of on short notice, come over there, and I'm sure he was on cloud 9 as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, of course, Dave Wilson has won a divisional event before, but I mean that's the first national one, and I'm sure it won't be the last either.
Yeah.
Does it mean now that our drivers are going to get paid that much? People are going to take them much more seriously and going to be looking over their shoulders.
Yeah, I think you're going to see, like I said, a lot more attention on it. You're starting to see the good numbers over here, and I mean, take the class I'm in, methanol dragster. I mean, some pretty solid runs. Timo Haberman running 31. That's right up there with him. He had some early numbers. It was about some of the quickest that's ever been in the class, and so pro mod guys. I think if we get some good conditions with all the heavy hitters and tuners and everything, you're going to see some pretty big numbers as well there.
So performance-wise, compared to say the US methanol classes, how close are we getting? Well,
I mean, as far as the blown car, top methanol dragster, the quickest ever is a 5:25. You've seen Timo go at 30 flat. The A fuel cars, the fastest speed is the 284, and we saw Dave Wilson go 279 last year. So I mean, right there knocking on the door. Pro mods, I think you're going to see more 5-second runs this year.
And having been around Europe and looked at the tracks we've got, how do our tracks compare?
I was really surprised. Over in the States, all you hear is, the tracks in Europe aren't as good, and that's why I was slower. Got over here and was really impressed with the amount of bite that the tracks, had, because over in the States, it's almost, you just don't see any tracks that are all asphalt like the tracks over here. So I really didn't know what to think of what the traction is going to be, but especially for the dragsters, the tracks are really good. They got a lot of bite to them, and the conditions are always great here in Europe. You very rarely see it get hot, and even I was messing with them last year in Hockenheim. Everybody's taking their shirts off and wiping and whining about how hot it is, and I'm like, it's just now getting to be a little bit warm. I don't know. Let's bring y'all over here to Texas and get 95 degrees and 75% humidity. Then talk to me about being hot.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've been to Austin and seen the air conditioned blocks you have in downtown, and yes, okay, I realise that we're just amateurs compared to you when it comes to the heat.
Yeah, but I can't handle the cold, so y'all got me there.